Walk me through how this happens because it's an explosive device. What do you remember from how it went down?
So there's a lot to give the full explanation of why. I can't give the full explanation of why what happened.
Got it.
I talk about a thing that I can't talk about.
Got it.
Uh,
No, I understand.
yeah, but it's unfortunate because if I could talk about that part, it would make so much sense. But the very short version is we were in Solder City that night, and we did an offset, so we were walking through Solder City at night, and we hit a house. Like that's the house. We hit the house. We go inside, and you know, it's just like, or I assume like a law enforcement. You can tell when you go in a house if the people are guilty or not. You can just feel it. Generally in my experience, if you go in there and they're shouting and the women are going crazy and it's it's the wrong house. If you go in and no one says a word, it's the right house, because the
Interesting.
guilty just shut up and don't say anything. The not guilty are like, what the hell are you doing here? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Guilty, they're just like, yeah, we know why they're here. It's not surprising. They're not happy about it, but they're not surprised. And so, anyways, that house, I was like, nah, just no, not these people. And so, anyways, we heard that I think two teams. They're like, hey, we actually think it's over here. So two teams went out. One was actually a team from the unit that I now play on TV, that was attached to us. They went out. They went on the front side, or went around to go to the front side of this other house, and my team was basically going towards the back side of the house. So very shortly, what happened was it was the wrong house, and when we hit that one house, the actual house it was, which was next door, which is not exactly next door because Solder City is kind of weird of how it's built. But they heard us. They were getting ready, prepping, their gear, and so they were ready to go. So when that team came around, a bunch of dudes opened up out of the front, what I assume would be the living room, with AKs, and shot. I think they shot three. If I'm not mistaken, they shot three of the members of that team. Two of them were pretty much out of the fight at that point. But they were, I mean, it was heavy, heavy. I wasn't on that side of the house, but just hearing it, I was like, oh man, that's extreme. So I ran into the back door, which came into the kitchen, cleared through there, went in the hallway, and those same guys, as we approached that room, um, shot through the walls of that hallway, shot the guy literally right next to me. So then we backed off, and then we were and I'd have to draw it out, but we were in a tactical position that was just there wasn't a lot we could do. So we were trying to kind of figure out how to solve it. And the next thing I know, I remember just the whole room, or actually it wasn't really a room, it was the hallway, so it was more like a tube straight at me, and just everything exploded. And I actually remember hitting the ground and looking up down the hallway. And I was just confused. I didn't know what had happened. And I can say, getting shot at, okay. Um, it's one thing, but the explosion made me feel small. It was like a superhero just grabbed me and was like, or it was like the Hulk grabbed me and was like, it was just, it felt like a supernatural power. And it blew, so it was a nighttime hit. It blew my nods and my nod mount off my face. So I went from, under nods to not being able to see anything. It obviously, my arm, I thought it blew off. I'm trying to think of what else it wrecked, but wrecked several things. But and everything was pitch black for me, and I really didn't know what was going on. I just felt my arm was blown off, so I got up and walked outside to the back, and there was a wall that we had hopped to get in. That wasn't happening, so I just put my back against the wall and tried to take care of myself. But I never lost consciousness. The only time actually I did lose consciousness is when, and I still to this day don't know how they got me over that wall. I have no idea. But other than that, probably 5 minutes that they got me over the wall, I never lost consciousness.
And I am literally stunned. I don't even know what to say. That is every part of that story, from the moment the first shots rang out to you getting back over the wall, losing consciousness, is hard for me, who's obviously never been in a gunfight, and I assume most people watching this who've never been in a gunfight, to even comprehend. Did you take a moment? Was there a moment when you looked down at your arm and you kind of understood, like, oh shit, like I'm in deep trouble? Or were you in such a state of shock that you didn't even really, quite frankly, understand what had just happened to your body? And if you can explain, how much of your arm are you able to see? Like, do you have a good assessment of how damaged it is in the moment?
So that's not a question I think I've ever been asked, but it's a good question. So when it happened, it killed the nerve in my arm to about here. So and I know this sounds weird, but it's the best way to describe it. So it felt gone from here. It felt not there. I know it sounds weird. And then I got outside, and there was a porch light, and I looked at it. And if you can see, so this was all gone. I mean, it was holding on by, basically half my arm, and it was broken in, I want to say 8 places. So I can't even replicate how it was hanging. And then up here, this was flayed out this way, and this was flayed out this way. So from about just above my wrist to my shoulder, when I looked at my arm in that light, I mean, it was hamburger. It was done. It was hamburger meat. It was zombie flesh. So yeah, I looked at it and I went, well, that's gone. That just that's that's going. And I knew it was bad. And then my first thing was, well, the arm's going. I'm losing my right arm. That sucks. And then I thought, and I'll never forget this thought in a million years. Then I literally saw that I had an arterial bleed. And I went, you're losing your arm. And then I was like, oh, I've got an arterial bleed, which if you have an arterial bleed, you've got, I'll be conservative and say 45 seconds to a minute to do something before you won't die. But in about 45 seconds, you're going to lose enough blood to where it's going to be hard for you to have the strength to solve it, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
I remember seeing that and going, well, okay, yeah, you're going to lose your right arm, but you better solve that bleed or you die. And that would be stupid. Don't know why I used that word, but in my head, I remember saying, and then you die, and that would be stupid. So, yeah, I knew how bad it was. And I'll tell you this, after I looked at it under that light, I did not, and I'm not exaggerating. Well, I did actually look at it one more time, but I didn't look at my arm uncovered for probably a year. I mean, I literally ignored it. In fact, in hindsight, I should have wore a freaking eye patch on my right eye. I just didn't look. I didn't want to be reminded of it. The next time I looked at it was actually when they saved it, because they told me they were going to cut it off when I went into surgery. But I woke up the next morning, looked over, it was there, and they saved it. And actually, by the way, they told me. Now again, I was on a lot when they told me that they were going to cut it off. I was on quite a lot of drugs. I was like, do whatever you want, cut off the legs. I don't care. I was like, go crazy. But they told me when they saved it the only reason that they even attempted to save it was because how many extremity surgeries they had done during that time frame because of V beds. So they just were now so advanced on, and again, I don't know the details, but they just had new techniques that he said a year ago we would have cut it off without even attempting to, again, do something different.
Did you ever find out what had happened to all the bad guys that were in the house? Did anyone ever kind of debrief you and say, "Hey, after the explosion went off, here's kind of how everything shook out afterwards"?
Yes, that was years later, but yes, yeah. The I've never told anyone this, but I'll tell you, or everyone watching this. Only one person lived on that whole thing, uh, and only one person lived, and the reason that person lived is because I didn't shoot him,
It,
and I could have. He actually had an AK. When I came into the room, his gun hit me in the chest.
and
And
so
I
was it? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, his gun hit, like, it was so close. I turned and his gun hit me. And the only reason I didn't shoot him is I could see behind him. I can't remember if it was pink or purple, but it was a color that stood out. I want to say pink, but again, I don't remember. But I could see like a pink or purple outline behind him. His wife was behind, or one of his, I don't know, was behind him. And that, in that, millisecond, so I ended up taking the gun from him. I threw him outside the room. They took him, but he's the only one that lived. And ironically, it's one of my few regrets of my time, because that guy ended up being the main facilitator of the whole thing.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
So all the other guys, they weren't around to do anything anymore. But for many years, I wondered if he went through the system and then got out and went and hurt other people. So one of my biggest regrets is that.